Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome all of you here. Those who are coming regularly knows that we have distinguished speaker here as almost a rule from all over the world. But we have never had here such a distinguished guest from country of Armenia like today. So it's my special privilege to welcome the Prime Minister of Armenia, Mr. Nikol Pashinyan. Many of our speakers here are the speakers which have the background in freedom fighting, and that's exactly the life story of Mr. Pashinyan, because he started his career as a free journalist. He spent some time in prison when he led the protest in his own country against the corruption in the politics. Then he became a world-known person when he led this famous Armenian revolution of 2018, and exactly like the story of our first president, Václav Havel, this activity has brought him by the election to become the Prime Minister of Armenia. Since that, he survived a lot, including a difficult time in the Second War for Karabakh, and winning the elections afterward, which he called as the earlier elections to regain the confidence. So I think this is a really strong example of a strong personality. We are very glad to have also the leader of Armenia. Here are some friends, you know, in particular the Catholics have a special affiliation to the Christian country. In Transcaucasia, Marek Benda is somewhere here who is running the group of Friends of Armenia in our lower house. So I see also Mirek Singer here, a great friend of Armenia, visiting many times, even when he was the governor of the Czech Central Bank, and many others, the ambassador, of course. So I welcome everybody here, and it's not my time, it's the time of our guests. So please, Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here today and address this distinguished audience. And I would like to express my appreciation to Mr. Alexander Vondra and his team for organizing and moderating this event. Armenia has traditionally friendly relations with the Czech Republic based on common values and is willing to enhance our cooperation in all areas of mutual interest. My visit coincides with the 30th anniversary of establishing diplomatic relations between our countries. During the past 30 years, Armenia and the Czech Republic have developed a solid bilateral agenda covering a wide range of areas, including active political dialogue and partnership in different fields of mutual interests. Today, I would like to speak about Armenia's democratic journey in a region that has been marked by turbulence and uncertainty, and to share with you Armenia's progress toward building a stable democracy in the face of many security challenges. Armenia's commitment to democratic development is a result of the non-violent revolution in 2018, which was inspired, among others, by the principles of the Velvet Revolution of the former Czechoslovakia, led by Václav Havel. After the revolution, my government initiated wide-ranging democratic reforms that including the fight against corruption, the shadow economy, and economic monopolies. We have safeguarded the freedom of speech and expression and turned the page of falsified elections, ensuring that the free expression of citizens' will is the only legitimate source of power. As a result, we have been able to achieve impressive economic growth, 7.6% in 2019, 5.7% in 2021, and 12.6% in 2022. The number of workplaces grew by around 30. The number of workplaces grew by around 32% in 2022 over 2017. Tax revenues grew by over 66% in 2022 over 2017. Armenia's sovereign rating has been upgraded. So have Armenia's international rankings in respect of economic and democratic performance, most notably regarding the freedom of expression and respect for human rights. My country currently leads the democracy and good governance rating table among the EU Eastern Partnership states in the following 5 areas: fight against corruption, independent judiciary, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of assembly and association, independent media and democratic rights, elections and political pluralism. Nevertheless, the Armenian people's trust in democracy is undermined due to the security challenges faced by Armenia in recent years. In September 2020, Azerbaijan unleashed a war against Nagorno-Karabakh. In May 2021, it invaded the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia, and in September 2022, initiated a new large-scale attack against Armenia, occupying some more of our sovereign territory. These events took thousands of lives, destroyed civilian infrastructure, and caused many people to go missing, in addition to those held captive by Azerbaijan to this very day. Dozens of thousands of Armenians have been forced to move out of their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh, joining the hundreds of thousands that had become refugees because of Azerbaijan's decades-long Armenophobic policies. As it is widely known, the 2020 November trilateral statement legally stipulates that the Lachin corridor must serve as a link between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. However, in gross violation of the said statement, from December 2022, Azerbaijan has imposed an unlawful blockade in the Lachin corridor, causing a humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. Moreover, despite the interim measures ordered by the ICJ in February 2023, Azerbaijan unlawfully set up a checkpoint in Lachin corridor, further escalating the situation. Azerbaijan not only has deprived the people of Nagorno-Karabakh of the right to freedom of movement, but also has disconnected the supply of natural gas and electricity. There is a shortage of food and essential supplies in Nagorno-Karabakh, and they are currently sold through coupons. Our belief is that these are not isolated actions, but rather Azerbaijan's preparation for ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh. In this sense, we consider it necessary to dispatch an international fact-finding mission to Nagorno-Karabakh and the Lachin corridor. The international community needs to make a clear and pointed assessment of the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is important for not only the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, but also for the future of democracy in our region, because the main question hanging in the air in the Republic of Armenia is whether democracy can ensure security and stability in our region. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of all this, our perception of the situation is guided primarily by the following democratic considerations. There is no alternative to peace in our region. On the sidelines of the first summit of the European political community held here in Prague in October 2022, we laid a solid foundation for achieving peace in our region during the four-party meeting between French President Macron, President of the European Council Michel, Azerbaijan's President, and myself. The main outcome of that meeting was that Armenia and Azerbaijan recognize each other's territorial integrity with the territories that the two republics had when gaining independence from the Soviet Union, as per the 1991 Almaty Declaration, which will be the basis for the subsequent delimitation of the borders. This understanding was reaffirmed during the trilateral meeting held in Sochi on 31 October 2022, where the sides underlined that the outstanding issues between Armenia and Azerbaijan must be resolved only on the basis of the 1991 Almaty Declaration and the UN Charter renouncing the use of force or the threat of force. Nevertheless, Azerbaijan continues its policy of threatening the territorial integrity of the Republic of Armenia and using force and the threat of force, constantly escalating the situation on the border with Armenia, as well as in Nagorno-Karabakh. Despite all this, Armenia remains committed to the policy of resolving the outstanding issues through negotiations, and we are ready to sign a peace agreement with Azerbaijan. At the moment, the main obstacles to signing such an agreement are the following. It has so far been impossible to agree upon language that will clearly state that Azerbaijan recognizes the territorial integrity of the Republic of Armenia with 29,800 square kilometers. It is the territory of the Soviet Armenian Republic. The mechanism for safeguarding the rights and security of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh is still uncertain. So is the Stepanakert-Baku dialogue format, which in our opinion should take place in the framework of an international mechanism. It has so far been impossible to agree upon mechanism for overcoming differences in the reading of the peace agreement text. And finally, there is no agreement on international and local mechanisms for implementing the peace agreement. We do, however, continue our efforts in order to succeed in all these areas. For 4 days now, Armenian and Azerbaijani delegations with facilitation by the United States have been negotiating in Washington for resolving all these issues. To conclude, I would like to highlight that as a result of the four-party meeting held in Prague on 6 October 2022, an important development occurred in the Armenia-European Union relationship. It was decided to deploy a short-term monitoring mission of the European Union on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border, which later evolved into a decision to deploy a long-term mission that started operating in Armenia in February. And we consider this as a very important decision, and particularly in the relations between European Union and Armenia, and we consider that as a very important expression of the support for Armenian democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Czech Republic for supporting above-mentioned decision, which is yet another manifestation, as I said, of support to Armenia's democracy. Thank you for your attention, and we can now take some questions. Thank you very much. It would be more convenient to answer from here.
Okay, you want to stand, so I will moderate the debate before I will give the floor to our audience. Maybe I would start with my question on my own, and then I already registered some interest. So let me start with this. European Union. You mentioned the Prague summit of the European political community, the idea of President Macron, you know, to build a platform for the communication with the countries who are eager to deepen the cooperation with the European Union, and on the other hand are not, let's say, fully ready, you know, to integrate immediately now. So if I ask you about your experience, you know, with the European Union policy towards Armenia, towards your country, just if you frankly tell us, you know, where you see the positives, and when on the other hand, where on the other hand you see some negatives, or where you would love to improve this.
Thank you for question. You know, in general, Armenia is a is in a very delicate situation because we are surrounded by many suspicions. There are many suspicions connected with Armenia because many people in West, they think that we are a Russian proxy government and country, and many in East, they believe that we are pro-Western government with pro-Western policies. And to be honest, some our neighbors, they are lobbying for those two positions, going into West and saying that, you know, Armenia is a close ally of Russia, and everything we impose against Russia, we should do against Armenia too. And the next day they flew to Moscow saying that, look, Armenian Prime Minister is cooperating very closely with European Union, implementing democratic reform agenda, etc. And the Prime Minister of Armenia derailing Armenia from east to the west. And to be honest, it opens some space for aggressive policies of our neighbors against Armenia. And sometimes we saw that there are some sympathies connected with that aggressiveness against Armenia, because some country maybe in this framework, they think that these aggressive policies will make Armenia more clever, considering their own way or their own point of view to be clever. Well, that is overall situation of Armenia, but in general, we as transparent as we can be, and of course we are interested in developing our cooperation with the European Union. And let's be frank, it wasn't an easy decision to invite EU monitoring mission to Armenia, because it doesn't give any security guarantee. But from the other side, it can bring new challenges. But from the other side, for us, it's very important to keep the focus, international focus on our region as well. Because after the events in Ukraine, almost all the international attention is focused on Ukraine, and that also opens some space for instability in our region and around our country. So it isn't a very direct answer to your question, but I think it can give a food for consideration and for thinkings.
Yeah. Got the message. Thank you very much. Look, maybe it opens my second and last question for the introduction. You mentioned the special geopolitical position of your country, which is encircled by the bigger ones, and you know, that reminds me about our own Czech experience, and maybe it can explain why, for example, there are two countries in the world which generates a lot of sympathy because of this similar destiny, and that's on one hand Israel, and on the other hand is Armenia. So I think that both two countries have here really special. You know, it's not just about relations are about the interest, but here it's something. It's about the sympathies, and so from this perspective, I fully understand that the approach towards Russia is a bit different in your country than in ours. At the same time, if you see the behaving of Russia in the last year in particular, so, and with your insight and knowledge, what we can expect from Russia, because look, what's happened, it will, I would say, touch or influence the relationship for many years to come, because some red lines has been crossed here. And what is your expectation about the Russian behaving? I know that it's maybe not easy question for you, but at the same time, you may have a bit different outlook logically than is the common outlook, for example, from Prague, you know, which is so much influenced by the experience of 1968, etc. So what we can expect from Russia in the next couple of years? Will be same Russia, will be different Russia?
You know, it is not only difficult question, but it is tricky question, because maybe I was thinking that you decided to check one more time whether I'm pro-Russian or pro-Western. So we won't have the same word. It's definitely. So I don't see any country that would be the same. After all this, there won't be any country, not only in Eurasian space, but all around the world, because what's happening now has direct impact on all countries, on all around the world. We will have totally different world, and that's definitely totally different relations, maybe totally different security systems. My assessment is, and you know, we sense that tangibly, the old world order is collapsing. That's definitely. And by the way, maybe it can sound like something strange for European audience, but the collapse of that old order started not from Ukraine, but started from the war in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, because all these events are interconnected, and maybe there is no enough public information yet about that, but all these events are interconnected, and you know, it's very important. During last year, I had many conversations with many leaders from East, from West, and I was wondering what is their point of view, what will be the world will be like next year, 2 years later, and all of them very sincerely said that nobody knows. It can sound like an absurd, but that is a reality. Nobody knows. Even the most influential leaders of the world don't know, because who can ensure that the nuclear war is impossible? Who can give a guarantee? I think nobody, because but nobody can say that it will happen, because it depends from many factors, and you mentioned the similarities between Czech Republic and the Republic of Armenia, and I would like to mention one more: no access to sea. It is very important factor for economy, for policies, for foreign policies of our countries, but the situation of Armenia is even worse, because we have 4 borders, and two of our borders out of 4 are totally closed, de facto. 2 of them, we can even say, not totally open because of geopolitics. Because with the border with Iran, you know, complications in relations between Iran and West. From the other side, the complications in relations between Georgia and Russia also restricts our access to the outside world, and that is the reality. And even in these circumstances, we are sure that democracy is a proper strategy for Armenia to move forward and to develop a country and even region.
Thank you very much for a very tricky answer to my tricky question. But yes, you are a smart man. Maybe just a supplementary question. You are absolutely right that the world is transforming itself into from one order into another. And it seems to me that, we are really heading, either we like it or dislike, towards more multipolar world. So towards more the world of the balance of power from the world which at least was ruled by some principles of the globalization, etc. Which of those two worlds, this global interconnected world guided by some rules of the game, or realpolitik of the multipolar world with the balance of power, in which out of those two is better for country like Armenia?
Like first version was
a cooperative, global cooperative model,
and
where
second one?
realpolitik, multipolar global balancing of power.
I think for all countries, multilateralism is more acceptable because it is more democratic-friendly environment to discuss international agenda and to reach some kind of agreements. But I'm afraid that we aren't moving toward that because the gap between conditionally saying Eastern and Western part of the world is enlarging. So maybe we would have not multilateralism, but dualism, which I don't think that is close to the multilateralism.
Thank you very much. So the first question is a woman there. Please introduce yourself and.
Armenian European magazine Orer, Anna Karapetyan. Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. You already have mentioned about Armenophobic politics of Azerbaijan. Let's be clear. It is a proto-genocidal, pre-genocidal situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. 5 months it is in the blockade, and now Azerbaijan has established a border checkpoint. So, the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh has become hostage in the hands of Azeri dictator who openly and regularly threatens those in Nagorno-Karabakh with ethnic cleansing. We all have witnessed ISIS or Daesh-style killings, beheadings of elderly, women and children, and not only during war, and not only in Nagorno-Karabakh, but after war and in Armenia itself. Azeri president openly and every day threatens giving you, Mr. Prime Minister, as the leader of Armenia, a very good chance and possibility to talk about remedial secession, having the prime example of Kosovo. Why aren't you using this international mechanism? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are right, and that is our assessment, and I already mentioned in my speech that the blockade of Lachin corridor and several other events, not only separate actions, but clear preparation for ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh. That's definite assessment of our government. From the other side, it is our belief that we need to address all issues through negotiations and through peace process. And we are devoted to a peace process despite all challenges. As a democratic country and as a democratic government, and I mentioned that in my speech, we think that only transparent processes, peace processes, can bring to the sustainable peace in our region. As far as the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians are concerned, we believe that the security and rights of Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians should be addressed in the negotiations, conversation, talks between Baku and Stepanakert, and all issues connected with the rights and security of the Armenians of the Nagorno-Karabakh, of people of Nagorno-Karabakh, should be addressed on that format. Unfortunately, until now, we don't see the Azerbaijani willingness to be engaged in the conversation, dialogue, negotiation with the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. And as I mentioned, it is very important part of seeking sustainable peace in our region. And there is no one formula to establish sustainable peace in our region, and there are many issues to be addressed, and that's why it isn't easy to achieve peace. So our position is that we need to strive and we need to work for reaching that. You know, we've been waiting and we've been not waiting, but working for more than 30 years. And we need to double our efforts for addressing the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, for establishing sustainable peace in our region, and because there is no positive alternative to that. And as I mentioned, we are devoted to peace agenda because we received a mandate for that from Armenian people as well.
No, sorry. No, sorry. Excuse me, we have some rules here, yeah? Please, Mirek Singh.
Miroslav Singara, generally. Mr. Prime Minister, thanks for coming and congratulations to achievement. As a matter of fact, we both participated a few weeks ago in the conference, and I had a pleasure to see the progress that your country did from the last time when I visited it in pre-COVID times. But let me ask you a question on allies for Armenia. How do you see one of the fastest growing and demographically positioned country that is as close to Armenia, I would say, like Europe, which is one of the oldest Asian democracies, India? Are you trying to develop something with them? Because logically, seeing from Prague, that would make a lot of sense, yeah? And they might have some interest also in.
We have quite good dynamics with India, and we are trying to develop our cooperation in different fields, economy, culture, sciences, education, security, and I agree with you that you know we have very good traditions with India as well, historic ties with India as well, and one of the most influential Armenian communities used to be in India, with the very rich political heritage and cultural heritage, and now there is only little Armenian community, but actually Indian government is very careful connected with the Armenian heritage in India, and we are grateful for that. But apart that, now we have good dynamics, and we are interested, and we are working, and we have impression that India also is interested to develop our further relations, and we are working. And I agree with you, yeah.
Julian?
Julian Nagel. I was in February 1988 when all the trouble started. I was there as a Voice of America correspondent. I was in Yerevan, Stepanakert, and Baku 10 years later in 1998, interviewing refugees in all three cities and elsewhere. And one thing that stuck in my mind from that visit was interviewing refugees from Agdam in Azerbaijan, who were living in a railway carriage or a whole train of cattle cars for years. And they thought that if only the railway line would open, they could go to Agdam. As we saw, but it was already known in 1998, as we saw in 2020, Agdam and other towns and villages in the occupation zone around Nagorno-Karabakh were basically leveled. There was nothing to go back to. And that raises the question, wasn't it inevitable that as Azerbaijan, once it had enough arms secured from Turkey or wherever, was going to go back to take the territory, not so much Karabakh as the surrounding territory? And that's something that simply hasn't been adequately addressed. Was it inevitable? And a separate question on Armenia's non-vote last week in the Council of Europe on admission of Kosovo as a member. Armenia did not participate. It didn't abstain, it simply did not participate in the vote. Azerbaijan voted against, Georgia voted against. What is it, just as a follow-up to the previous question, what is it that bothers Yerevan about Kosovo's independence? Why shouldn't Kosovo be in the Council of Europe, or the UN for that matter? Thank you.
You know, actually, we have started some relations, some conversation with Kosovo, and in reality, we are developing some relations with Kosovo. Yes, carefully, cautiously, but we go forward because there are different factors impacting that. I had opportunity to have a conversation with Kosovo president in Tunisia, in Munich, and I think we are working. We are working because there are many nuances to be considered. And from the other side, you know, was it inevitable or not? It is very difficult to answer because you know, the main policy of Azerbaijan, to be honest, was the revenge policy before the 2020 war and even now, because I mentioned the Armenophobia in Azerbaijan. To be honest, in Armenia we never had Azerbaijanophobia. Yes, there was and there is a situation issue, but we never had Azerbaijanophobia in our country. There can be some separate expressions, but in Azerbaijan, Armenophobia is an official policy, and that was the main obstacle for having breakthrough in the negotiation process. Because, by the way, Armenia was quite flexible during the long time of the negotiation process. And when something was achieved through very difficult negotiations, in the next moment, Azerbaijan demanded more. And it continues until now. Because look, now, what is, I said, in Prague, we have decided that Armenia and Azerbaijan recognize each other territorial integrity according to the 1991 Almaty protocols, and the territory, the principle of Almaty protocols would lay as a basis for further delimitation process. But what happened next? Azerbaijani president started to speak about some historical maps that should serve as a basis for delimitation process. And he said that Yerevan is an old Azerbaijani city. Yerevan is the capital of Republic of Armenia. And actually, Azerbaijan continues to bring new territorial claims against Armenia. And now that is one of the most important obstacles for peace process. And the Armenophobia and revenge is an official policy of Azerbaijan. And that is the reality. And what kind of historic maps mention Azerbaijani president mentions. And there was even a half joke, but maybe it would be appropriate to use the maps of our region that existed before Jesus Christ. And Armenia is sure 100% that we can point out the territory of Armenia on those maps. And we are sure that 100% that nobody can show Azerbaijan on those maps. What is the historic maps? So, but the reality is that in Prague, we agreed that the 1991 Almaty Protocol should serve as a basis for territorial integrities of two republics. And we are devoted to that agreement, and we are ready to go forward on that basis. Thank you.
There was a question there.
Yes. Hello, dear Prime Minister. It's our great pleasure and honor to have you with us in Prague. My name is Pavel Havlicek, and I would like to thank you for your interesting speech on your democratic journey.
Could you please keep closer microphone?
Yes, thank you. So it's our great honor actually to have you with us in Prague. My name is Pavel Havlicek, and I'm representing a think tank based here in Prague, Association for International Affairs. I would like to thank you actually for your speech on the democratic journey, and for me as a Czech, it's indeed always actually warming my heart to remember about your Velvet Revolution that you had 30 years after our own here in Czechoslovakia. My question to you will be on the Eastern Partnership, because your country is one of the 6 members actually of that, and as you mentioned yourself when speaking about the big shifts and geopolitical turbulences in the region of South Caucasus, but also beyond that, actually, I would like to ask, where do you see your country within the Eastern Partnership? What do you expect from the European policy of Eastern Partnership? The dynamic is obviously that 3 of the 6 countries are now officially on the EU track sometime in the future becoming EU members, and I hope that will happen very soon. Where this leaves your country of Republic of Armenia, what is your wish for the relations with the European Union, but also your expectation from the Eastern Partnership? Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as I said, we see democracy, and we adopted democracy as a strategy for us. It isn't just a matter of circumstances. Democracy is our genuine belief, and it is like a set of our values, and we are interested in deepening our cooperation with the European Union. And now European Union is our main partner in democratic reform agenda, and we hope to have more support from European Union for Armenian democracy, for reform agenda. And European Union last year, in 2021, pledged to implement the investment and economic plan for Armenia with the fund of 2.6 billion euros, and we're looking forward to see the implementation of that plan to develop further our democratic institutions, to develop and increase the standards of our economy and our production, to have more access to the European Union market, to enhance the perception of European values in our society. By the way, it's very important to state that after the sending of the EU monitoring mission to Armenia, the overall perception of the European Union in Armenia developed quite positively. Even before that, the overall perception of the European Union in Armenia was quite positive, but especially after the sending and monitoring mission, the perception developed, and our society assessed very positively recent resolutions of the European Parliament, because our society saw the exact and objective expression of the current state on those resolutions. And so it is our perception is that we need to continue the democratic reforms and to develop our democratic institutions And very important factor I mentioned in my speech, to prove that democracy is able to provide security as well. And of course we understand that only guarantee for security can be sustainable peace. And we hope that international community would support us to reach to that peace.
Mr. Prime Minister, good afternoon. My name is Onshir Behan and I am a student of diplomacy. First of all, I would like to thank you a lot for the opportunity of having you here today. And I would like to ask you if you think the United Nations should get more involved in the peace negotiations, be it through the General Assembly or the Security Council. And in your opinion, if you think the United Nations are interested enough in the situation in Armenia. Thank you.
Yeah, you know that unfortunately in UN Security Council we have a very complicated situation connected with the developments, and our point of view is that Security Council should have discussed the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh until now, but unfortunately we don't see that, and some very concrete steps should have been taken, but it wasn't done. So it very bright expression or very bright answer to your question, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to work with the Security Council members to deliver this whole situation. But to be honest, it isn't connected with us, with our region, not only with our region, but you know the overall international situation doesn't push for constructive cooperation in the Security Council, and as usual, the small countries are the first victims of such kind of situation.
Hello. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Prime Minister, for being here with us. Recently, in one of your speeches, you said that nothing is possible without good economy, and I fully agree with you, and I really want to thank you and your team for all of the good stuff that you've done for Armenia's economy. But I think what is also democracy is not possible without pluralism, true pluralism of opinions. And I think many people would agree that currently the opposition that we see in the parliament is a joke. What is your team going to do to clean the environment for a proper opposition that will challenge you in ideas and not in some pathetic stories?
You know, I think that recently, and it is a really very important question, and I think recently something changed in our parliament, because I think that at least with my participation we had at least two very important discussions in our parliament. One of them, by the way, happened yesterday, just yesterday, and the discussion of the annual report of Armenian government. I think, of course, there were some incidents, etc., but overall, I think we had very important discussions, because you know the circumstances of the election of current parliament. The situation was very polarized, very negative after the war, with the harsh rhetorics I should accept not only by the opposition but by ourselves as well. And now we are trying because the maybe emotions became a little lower, and it opened a space for more constructive discussions. And I think it is the responsibility of government and majority as well to do everything to create a proper platform, especially in the parliament, for constructive, yes, sometimes very sharp, but with the constructive content. Because, you know, recently I've made some very important statements in our parliament, and I saw that opposition heard my messages last year, and it is a success for our parliament, because last year they wouldn't even heard that. They would, I don't know, throw something, and they would fight with arms, and I don't know. But it is another challenge for our democracy to be able to create proper atmosphere for logical discussions. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be sharp remarks, but in general we started to hear each other, and I hope that it isn't just an accident, it is something kind of new culture. Because during annual report of government, I spent, I think, 3 days in our parliament, and deliberately I stayed there to hear all the remarks from opposition, all the questions that they raised in communication with the members of our government, and I saw that there is a room for very deep discussions about the present, future, and even on the past of Armenia.
Thank you. I think last question from the audience is, yeah, here.
I think you need to switch on the microphone.
Yeah, one more time. Vahagan Gasparian, Erasmus Fellow in Leuven, Belgium, and Charles University, Prague. Mr. Prime Minister, can you speak about current state of Armenians' relationship with Russia and how you see it evolving in the future? And recently, information appeared in the press that Russia is blocking the import of weapons purchased from India. Can you comment that information too? Thank you.
You know, I wouldn't like to discuss publicly the very sensitive issues connected with the security and security capacities of Armenia. But as you can see, we are trying to be as a responsible member of international community as it's possible in our circumstances. And we have very close relations with Russia, and we are member of European Economic Union. It is the common custom space and that means common economic space, and that means that our economy is very dependent from the success of the European Economic Union. From the other side, we have sanctions that were imposed by Western countries, European Union and United States against Russia. And in this situation, we have, to be honest, some opportunities for our economy, but some challenges as well, because we need to keep the rules of European Economic Union. From the other side, we need to keep the rules of sanctions, not to violate those sanctions, because our relations, as I mentioned, with the European Union and with the United States are very important. We have, in 2019, we started strategic dialogue with the United States. We have a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement with the European Union. And that's why we are in so complicated and so sensitive situation. But we now are trying, and I think we succeeded on that, to be as responsible member of international community as it possible. But from the other side, there are complications in different relations. You could spot some complications in relations between Armenia and CSTO. Armenia is member of CSTO, and by the way, last year we hosted the CSTO summit, but unfortunately we haven't been able to reach to a consensus connected with very important decisions of CSTO, and we stated our position with respect to our partners, but from the other side, we expressed our frustration connected with CSTO because we think that CSTO failed to deliver the obligations that that organization had and has to Armenia. And all those processes transparent, and we are sincere in our policies, and we are transparent, by the way. And it brings more complications to that, because we are transparent, because democracy is transparency is a kind of the part of the democratic style. And we are doing that, understanding that maybe it isn't always the perfect way for doing policies, but from the other side, it is our responsibility to be transparent, first of all, in front of our people and in front of international community as well.
Before we will conclude, as you maybe noticed, Tomáš Pojar joined us meantime, my former colleague from the center and currently the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister and the government. So, Tomáš, you should have certainly the right to have the last remark or question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I deeply apologize for coming late, but I was called for some emergency meeting, which I had to attend. nothing that is going on. Everything is under control, but I simply couldn't be here on time. So I apologize. And I was told by Sasha that you haven't discussed that much Ukraine. So I would have like 2 questions on Ukraine, since you know. Since you were with Russians and Ukrainians in one state, and you have seen also directly in your country and in your neighborhood fighting in the last 30 or 35 years. First question would be, what is your crystal ball saying that will be in Ukraine in 1 year from now, or how the conflict will go on? But the second question, which is related to Armenia, is what would be the best outcome of Russian invasion of Ukraine from your perspective regarding the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh or Armenian and Azerbaijani? Because it will, I'm convinced that it will have effect. It can have positive effect, negative effect, etc., but it will have effect the developments in Ukraine on other conflicts, frozen conflicts, tensions in the area of the former USSR, and not only there, of course, because everyone is watching it. I'm sure that Chinese and Taiwanese are watching the same.
Thank you. I think, unfortunately, that conflict will last, and unfortunately, but from the other side, if you asked what is the fortunate outcome from this conflict, I don't expect any positive outcome from this conflict, because we know from our experience that there is no, it isn't realistic to wait some positive outcome from any conflict. It isn't realistic, and especially in this case, when actually the whole world now, the whole world is a victim of that conflict. Because, as I said, now we see the collapse of the not old but previous order, but from the other side, if you would ask what was that order, what was the core content of that order, it would be very difficult to answer. Very difficult to answer. But now for me it's clear that that conflict would last, and there won't be positive outcome, unfortunately, because I can't say that any positive outcome from any conflict is possible. We can speak about how to mitigate the negative impact of any conflict. So I don't, and from the other side, if maybe my conclusion would be provocative, and if that conflict won't last, maybe it would be the worst scenario, taking into consideration that, for example, a nuclear intervention could stop this whole history any moment. So I think the situation is totally unpredictable, and there is any think tank or any institution that can predict what will happen next year, unfortunately even next week. Even even next month. I can only say one thing definitely. Next week I will visit Moscow.
Good luck.
Well, okay, thank you very, very much. You know, I have to tell you that usually I have the doubts whether to invite top politicians like prime ministers or president. On one hand, it raised the status of our college, of our center. On the other hand, many of those folks are boring, just swimming on the surface. You are certainly the exception. You are intellectual, you are great, and I really appreciate that your deep insight and your willingness to respond openly all the questions here, which were tricky, as always. So I think I want to thank everybody for coming here to help us to create the atmosphere. I want to thank Katka Vajzová for superb organization. And most of all, I want to thank you for being with us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for your invitation.